welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, Pacifica host Garland Nixon sorts out the one side to every story, media myths surrounding billionaires, bombs, and banana plantations.
Good evening. My name is Garland Nixon. One of the things that I really try to push, the point that I get across is just talk to people that you don't agree with. Listen to people that you don't agree with. Do not demonize people because they have a different perspective than you, because they see life different. Maybe they have a different culture. That's one of the unfortunate things I think that's happening. We get divided. And when people ask me, hey, what's the solution? And I always say the solution is for working class people to come together and realize that we need to stick together for our needs and our principles. I was listening to a speech by J.D. Vance the other day, and as a political analyst, I try to listen to all the speeches and everything. Got to stay informed. And he started off by saying, the leadership class, and basically here's what he was saying: the leadership class has made an error because they moved all their stuff to China, and here let me sum it up. They thought China would just continue to provide labor and keep their mouths shut and know their place. But what do you know? The Chinese people decided to innovate. The Chinese people decided to have their own scientific breakthroughs and work hard. And what do you know? They passed us. Oops, we made a mistake. People aren't willing to, those yellow people aren't willing to stay in their place. And that's really what's happening. The West, the US and Europe are very angry because the Chinese and other countries that are supposed to stay in their place ain't willing to stay in their place. And now we got to bomb them or something like that, because that's all we know is violence, right? I mean, the West, the US empire, etc. And so I'm listening to that. And the first thing I thought was, he said the leadership class, where what I usually say is the ruling class, the ruling elite. In other words, when I say this is about economic class, politics are about economic class. People are like, no, it's about right or left or this or that, or MAGA people or Democrats and Republicans. To the wealthy, it's all about economic class. He even said it. They use the term economic class. When we use the economic class, no, that's communism or that's crazy or something, because they don't want us to realize that working class people all have the same needs. And that if we ever wake up and realize that working class people all have the same needs, we won't be fighting over things. We won't be hating each other. We won't somehow think that some billionaire, well, we got good billionaires and their billionaires. We got our billionaires versus their billionaires. Ain't no billionaires, you're billionaires. The working class people need to come together. And so now what we have, something interesting, 2 months in, Donald Trump, I'm the peacemaker, I'm bringing peace, right? And of course, needless to say, he's doing exactly what the empire does. The empire does genocide. They're back to genocide in Gaza. They're back to attacking Yemen. And one thing for sure, the Democrats ain't gonna push back on that, are they? They ain't gonna say, hey, wait, you're killing innocent people and you're doing a genocide. They will go against Trump for a lot of things, but genocide ain't one of them, because that's what the empire does. How pathetic and sad is that? Meanwhile, we got old Doge boy running around. What's interesting? Waste, fraud, and abuse. We got to fire all of these employees because we got to stop waste, fraud, and abuse. When you and I know this ain't about waste, fraud, and abuse. It's about getting rid of lots of public employees so you can then replace them with artificial intelligence. And then who's going to get the contract for artificial intelligence? Oh, Doge boy and all of the tech, moguls from Silicon Valley. They'll be the ones that get the AI, replace these employees. Also, let me add this. Does anybody believe for 1 second that if, let's say, they fire so many federal employees that they save, let me give you a number, 20 billion, $10 billion. Does anybody believe for 1 second that they're not going to increase the Pentagon budget by more than they, quote, save from getting rid of them? They're just getting rid of, they are downsizing them. But part of it is ideological. They're going to get rid of so they want to get rid of the Department of Education. What's going to happen then? All of those bills are going to be pushed down to the states and make our education system even worse. All they're going to say is, you know what? The federal government ain't going to pay the money that they were paying for education anymore. So the states are going to have to do it. So they're going to force it down to the states. and they're going to overtax the state budgets. It's simple as this. During 2008 and early neoliberalism, what did they do? They wiped out all of the good jobs in the private sector. People had jobs working in factories, people had pensions, people had retirements, all that stuff. Early neoliberalism, they went after that and they wiped those out, and people they're not in unions, they don't have retirements and all that stuff. Now they're going to the private sector to do the same thing, to wipe out all the good jobs in the private sector. And let me add this. They get rid of federal employees. They're going to replace them. When they realize how bad it is, which they already know that things ain't working, they'll go out and give out contracts. But the people that they replace them with, guess what? They won't have pensions. They won't have they'll just be contracts. This is just another way to screw over the working class. That's what billionaires do. That's what this system does. That's what neoliberal capitalism does. That's what it's going to do. That's what we're dealing with. Just like all of the people that used to work in those factories and woke up one day and said, hey, all of our jobs are gone. Now they're going after the private sector. It's the neoliberalism, it eats its own. It's eating itself inside out. But the money's still going to go to the rich. The money's still going to get just like it did before. And here's something that's interesting. Trump's been in here, and as his numbers start to tick down, right? They're starting to slowly tick down because people are realizing, just like they do every 4 years, that they've been had. What's interesting is this. Traditionally, I think a lot of people are joining me. I think a lot of people are joining those of us who says, man, ain't neither one of these parties going to do nothing for us. Let me tell you why. Because as Trump's numbers start to tick down, and they will tick down, they will continue to tick down, because he ain't going to keep his word, and the things that he does keep his words on will be the crappy stuff. As they start to tick down, let me read an article for you. Democratic Party's favorability hits record lows. This is from last week, 5 days ago. Democratic Party's favorability hits record lows in 2 polls. The Democratic Party's latest approval rating hit record lows in a pair of polls on Sunday. An NBC poll found 27% of registered voters say they view the party favorably, the lowest favorability rating for Democrats in NBC polls going back to 1990. Listen to this. Only 7% of respondents, this is an NBC News poll, said they have a very positive view of the party. Another poll released by CNN similarly found 29% of voters view Democrats in a positive light, 27 to 29%. So here's what's happening. People who, I don't know, maybe falsely, poor misled suckers, thought, oh, Trump's going to save us. They voted for Trump. And now they're ticking away from Trump like, hey, perhaps we've been had. Yeah, perhaps you have. But they're not going to see the Democrats expected, well, they'll just leave Trump and jump back on our wagon. Yes, sir, they're coming back. No. They didn't like what the Democrats were selling. After 4 years of disastrous policies, 4 years of war, prices going through the roof, nobody could afford anything, and the only thing the Democrats could find more money for was, what are we going to do? Hey, people are struggling. Yeah, but we got another $60 billion to go to Ukraine. Oh, hey, wait, we've got a genocide going on. Well, we got to give them more money because we wouldn't want the genocide to stop, right? That's all. We got to bomb the Houthis. We got to threaten Iran. What about China? Threaten them. That's all the Democrats could do, which is pretty much the same thing that Trump's doing in one. The sad thing is, the only one thing Trump is doing that is worth a crap, one thing, and that is he's trying to end the war in Ukraine. The only thing he's doing worth a crap is the only thing the Democrats are mad at him about. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And no wonder they're just a war party, which is the same thing as the Republican Party. They are just a party. What'll happen? The Republicans will cut things for the poor and screw over the poor people, which is what they're surely going to do. And you know what the Democrats will do? And people already know. They'll run on that. They'll say, vote for us because the Republicans screwed over the poor people. And you know what's going to happen if people vote for them? They ain't going to fix it. They're going to say, well, now that we've got that done, back to war. We've got to attack somebody. We've got to blow somebody up. More money to the Pentagon. People are just simply saying, I don't see a party that's offering me anything. I'm not here to say Trump is good. No, Trump is, I could go on and on about Trump. I don't have to. There's no point. What am I supposed to say about Trump? The only thing I would say about Trump is that he is, what's the word I'm looking for? A little more entertaining than the Democrats. He's crappy. He's just a little more entertaining. Every now and then, he's an entertainer a little bit more. But as far as policy, what you have is this. You have a system, a horrific system, a system that takes money, that does what, here's what our system does. Let me make it clear. It extracts money from the poor and working class people and puts it in the hands of the rich, not just here. It extracts money from poor people around the world. It extracts money from poor countries. You ever heard of a term of a guy in Guatemala? Here's an example. His name was Arbenz. He came to power in Guatemala at the time. The U.S. government was doing all kinds of, U.S. corporations was over there shafting the Guatemala people, building banana plantations and stuff. And Arbenz comes to power and he says, just some moderate policies he was going to change. I think that some of these peasants should be able to own land and some of the people here should be able to own land. You know what happened? He just came up with moderate policies to help the people of Guatemala a little bit. You know what the U.S. government did? Overthrew him and put in a brutal, vicious dictator and gave all the money back to like Dole, the United Fruit Company, whatever, right? So let me add this. So whenever the United States government tells you, fill in the blank, this guy is a brutal dictator, understand that the history of the United States is installing brutal dictators. That's what we do. If we didn't install somebody in a country, truth is, he's probably not a brutal dictator. They're going to tell you that, but the odds are, I'll put it like this. If the United States installs somebody in a government, the odds are, our history tells us, the only people we install, I could go on, Pinochet, on and on and on. When we install somebody, they are a brutal dictator. And the reason the Shah of Iran, I could go on and on. And the reason we install brutal dictators is because the United States wants to steal the resources of that country. And it's a lot easier to do when there's a dictator that sells out to us and doesn't do any good for the people. But there's a cover story. Here's the cover story every single time. He's a brutal dictator, and we've got to stand up for fill in the blank. Independence. We got to stand up for democracy. We've got to stand up for the people. That's never the case. We ain't standing up for democracy. The people around the world know it. Unfortunately, this is the unfortunate part that I think, and this is why America is in real trouble. It would be bad enough if the people in America were uninformed. What's bad is the people are propagandized and misinformed so badly. When you talk to Americans, and I see it sometimes on the show, and somebody will make a statement, and you know me, this is what I believe in. I don't care if you disagree with me. That's fine. That's good. Wonderful. It's healthy to disagree with you, right? But have more than a superficial understanding of what you're saying. That's all. If you say, well, Garland, I think this is correct. Okay, good. Wonderful. And I ask you a question about it. Why do you believe that? Right? 99.9% of the time, the person who said that heard it on TV and they don't know why they believe it. And that's most of our politics.
And coming up next on Arts Express.
Welcome aboard the Staten Island Ferry.
This boat is cursed. We're all going to die. I heard stories about a monster that lurked in the underbelly of the ferry. Steamboat Willie.
That's gonna make one cartoon someday.
No! Come quick! Everything is not cool. We have a huge rodent problem.
What the are you?
It was like a demonic rodent with shorts and a hat. Maybe it wants some cheese.
I said we tossed his ass overboard.
Our world is but Willie's world? It's the happiest place on earth.
It is a small world after all.
And those were scenes from Screamboat, the latest adventure in horror playing out on the Staten Island Ferry, and starring self-described anti-heroine stuntwoman and multitasking leading lady and directress Amy Schumacher, our guest on the show, along with a common theme in her movies, reimagining scary versions of icons, like a bad Santa in The Mean One, Johann Sebastian Bach in Back to the Future, and Mickey Mouse as an exploited and abused working-class cartoon going postal on board the Staten Island Ferry as alias Steamboat Willie. Schumacher as an EMS worker on board also shares thoughts about how going for a master's in fine arts at a Russian acting conservatory in Tashkent has influenced her style on screen, coming up.
Coming soon from the wonderful world of Willie. Set sail for an adventure like no other. Meet Steamboat Willie. He's wacky. He's wicked.
Oh!
All aboard the Staten Island Ferry. Willie's world of mischief and mayhem. But he's not taking this trip alone. Willie is joined by a group of unsuspecting passengers, along with 5 fearless friends.
We're all going to die.
This is no fairy tale.
It's the happiest place on earth.
Screamboat.
I want to be where the people are.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Prairie.
Hello, Amy Schumacher, and welcome to our show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Okay, now, what was it about Screamboat that got you on board, both theatrically and metaphorically?
Sure. So I'm actually married to Stephen Lamorte, who's the writer, director, creator of Screamboat, having just done The Mean One a year and a half, 2 years before. We wanted to make a collaboration that was both horror and a nod to Disney.
And what can you say about the kind of woman you wanted to play?
Yeah, I do a lot of stunts and action, but as a person, I'm soft, I'm gentle, and I like peace and harmony. And something that I want to create in characters is the ability to have vulnerability, but also a really tough, hard side. Someone who can stand up for herself or stand up for others who can't speak out for themselves. And so within that, I get to play an EMT in Screamboat, and she's a little bit hardened to having been an EMT in New York for so long on the overnight shift.
And what are your thoughts about the enduring popularity of horror in movies as a reflection of mass consciousness? And on the opposite side of escapism, what about the popularity of horror movies as a reflection or reaction of audiences to what's going on that's troubling in the real world all around them?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think that's something we've been thinking about a lot as well in terms of what's going on in the world and, you know, a chance to escape. It's easy to say that what we're creating isn't political, but that's definitely not true. Art is political regardless, and I think our chance to make a statement, and for me as a female producer and actress, to make a representation, especially in the horror world where women are not overly sexualized or get a chance to be strong and independent. I mean, you know, the final girl is a really cool element of horror in that often the toughest, strongest person, last person standing is the, you know, brave woman. And there's something about that I do really love.
Yeah. And as an actress from the West Coast, what are your thoughts about the experience of filming New York City? An observation about New York City that's been made that, quote, New York City is like being in an abusive relationship with the coolest person in the world.
What a great question. That's really fun. You know, I am married to a Staten Islander. And yes, so we went to New York to film this movie. I had been there many times before, obviously with him, and our family is there. We wanted to make a true representation of New York and New York life. And our movie takes place on the Staten Island Ferry. And, you know, my husband had ridden the boat thousands of times, but together we rode it back and forth, observing real New Yorkers doing their day-to-day. And as, you know, a West Coast person who also lives in LA currently, I'm from Seattle, but it's interesting because my perspective is it's tough to live in New York. You've got to be a little thick-skinned, but the open heart and the, New Yorkers don't mince words, but they're so honest that you know that what they're saying to you is always genuine. And I do really love that. So I don't know. It's a tough place. And filming on Staten Island was tough. I mean, if you want to say abusive relationship, I'm not sure. We endured to shoot on that old Staten Island ferry for sure.
And what can you say about going for a master's in fine arts at a Russian acting conservatory in Uzbekistan, and what that experience was like?
Oh, that experience was life-changing. I absolutely love it. I actually just had the privilege for the first time in my career to write some of my old colleagues and say, my movie is going to play in theaters in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Let's get a group together. And man, 22-year-old Amy would have been, that's the dream, of I get to study in this small theater in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and then go back to America and eventually show the world some of the lessons I learned there. But studying there was absolutely life-changing and beautiful. The actors at the theater, it's a conservatory theater, and then master's program, are the most talented I've ever met. And the way that the city and the culture holds artists and acting in such high esteem is really an honor. And it was something we had to learn to respect as young student actors of, if we get to step on the stage, it's an honor, so you better take it very seriously. And I got to learn to really tap into what kind of stories I wanted to tell and to find authenticity and truth in performing those stories, and met some of the most wonderful, amazing people. And, the style of teaching acting and theater and the arts in a Russian conservatory program is an honor, and they take it very seriously. And I've never worked harder in my life. We lived and breathed theater for, the years that I was there, and it's kind of all we did. And it bled over into day-to-day life and just observing the human experience and how to bring that into the art to be truth tellers when we're performing as well. And it's something I'll hold forever.
And do you feel that experience has influenced your approach to acting uniquely in any way?
Definitely. For me, because physicality was a big part of the program, and first, even the simple things of find how your character moves, how do they sit, how do they walk, that physicality is something that I take with me. And then, of course, we learned all of the ballet, acrobatic, stage combat, but the stunt and physical part is what I relate to really well. So the element of physically finding my character and my body first is something that I really love to do. And then training physically to play a character, not just what is very important to understand in my mind, who she is, where she's coming from, what her experiences might be that inform what's happening currently. All of that is obviously very important, but I tap in the best when I can physically feel it. And so I got to do that with this character because, I go toe-to-toe with Steamboat Willie, little spoiler, but these physical elements of it are where I feel like I find my strength.
Now, Screamboat has quite a lot to do with cartoons, and specifically a somewhat recycled, scary Mickey Mouse. What are your thoughts about that element in the film? And the opening quote before the film begins from Walt Disney, quote, "All the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles have strengthened me. You may not realize it when it happens, but a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you."
You don't think that's going to be a Walt Disney quote? And I think it's a representation of our film as well, in that, in terms of the jokes and the through line of the joke of, you think, oh, this is going to be a horror movie, and then we hit you with a Disney joke, a Disney reference, a fun quip, sort of keeping it light and fun. And as indie filmmakers, I mean, I feel like I feel that quote every day. We are fighting for a place within the theater system. We are fighting to open our own doors and not wait for them to be open. And we get knocked down every now and then, but we definitely just keep getting back up. And we felt that a lot with this film. of we believe in ourselves, we believe in what we're making, we put a lot of heart and passion and talent into it. We get pushed down, we stand back up. We get, kicked in the teeth, we get back up. And to answer your question about the cartoon element to it, it's really fun. I think what we've been able to do within the movie is create, it's not a live action cartoon, but it's silly. And the things that our character Steamboat Willie, is doing, and sort of some of the gore elements and the heart and humor are reflective of it being a cartoon. So it's silly, it's over the top, it's cartoony. And then there's also some fun nods to actual old school cartoon elements in the movie. Both what this really is a cartoon mouse that we've made, a live action creature.
And as a stunt performer in movies, what can you say about your experiences and the challenge as a woman for you in the male-dominated stunt world and prevailing?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. It's a challenge. Stunt work is definitely challenging. And I have been lucky enough that the people that I've trained with and a lot of the stunt coordinators that I've worked with, both are predominantly male, but are incredibly respectful and wanting to lift up female stunt performers. And even our stunt coordinator on the Mean One, they're trying to help change some of the stigma around that and make sure that we get to give female stunt performers their chance to shine as well. And I feel like we've done that. And, one thing that I've been doing as an actor and producer and stunt performer is creating my own opportunity. So as I was saying earlier, we know that I want to do the stunts. I want to do the physical action stuff. So I build it into the projects that I'm making so that I don't have to wait for someone else to give me permission.
And any last word on Screamboat? And was Screamboat actually filmed on the Staten Island Ferry? And what was that experience like for you?
It was filmed on a decommissioned Staten Island ferry. We shot there for about 22 days. I think we might be the only film who has been able to do that, and that's because we were on the decommissioned ferry. You're allowed to shoot on the ferry that's running, but you have to get off every 24 minutes at the port and then get back on, so it makes it impossible to shoot. So we were really fortunate that we were able to shoot on an actual ferry. There are so many elements of that we did not even know we needed to prepare for. Yeah. The boat is much, much, much bigger than you even think it's going to be. It's huge, and there are a ton of stairs, and it's, a big metal box that means that any kind of cell service or walkie-talkie kind of service working, it's very challenging. But being on it, especially as an actor, we didn't have to create from our imagination the surroundings. We were really in it. We were really in the dirty old engine room that had a creepy old feeling to it. Creaks and cracks and drips and drops and all of those things were there. You didn't have to just play them. We got to feel it, which, what a dream as an actor to be able to do that. And standing up on the top of the ferry, on the roof of the ferry, and it's dark outside, and the small mouses around, and we got to really feel all of that. So we did film on that ferry, and then we filmed on the actual moving ferry for some of our shots as well. Navigating through general public who wasn't obviously going to be in our shots, so we had to do them very late night and stand in the ferry terminal and feel true New York at 3 a.m. in a ferry terminal while trying to film our New York movie. But that was really fun, and I think all of that added to the energy and the love and the heart that you can feel in the movie. It's the ferry boat itself is a character within the film, and so I think we're super thankful that we got that opportunity.
Oh, well, that sounds like a horror off-screen.
It was. Trust me, it was.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Amy Schumacher, for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. Bye.
up next on the show. A continuing conversation with Kate Evans about her graphic novel, Red Rosa, touching on the life and revolutionary resistance of Rosa Luxemburg and reading passages from her letters.
This is Mitchell Cohen. I'm sitting with Kate Evans, who's the author of a fantastic graphic biography of Rosa Luxemburg called Red Rosa. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Using her letters the way you did was something that nobody had done before.
I found one little quote about a fly. With every fly that one carelessly swats and crushes, the entire world comes to an end. In the refracting eye of the little fly, it is the same as if the end of the world had destroyed all life. So that's the basics of her respect for other living beings. So I contrast that in the book with some of the quotes that the other people were making about her, because she was a hate figure in the German press at the time because of her ethnicity and because of her gender. She was Bloody Rosa. Some of the sexism that Rosa Luxemburg experiences is just jaw-dropping. There's a letter between a couple of prominent Socialist Party leaders. One of these guys, August Bebel, he's written a book called Women and Under Socialism, which is an early feminist tract. Okay, so he says, "Dear Rosa must not be allowed to spoil our plans. I shall see to it this ridiculous call for a republic will be relegated to obscurity." He sounds like a Bond villain already, yeah? To which Victor Adler says, "The poisonous bitch will yet do a lot of damage. She's as clever as a monkey, yet her sense of responsibility is totally lacking."
These were actual quotes?
These are actual quotes, and I give the actual sources at the back of the book as well. It's really important that people know that all the way through the book, I'm not making up the words that are coming out of people's mouths. These are things they would have written it down in a letter, so I change the context, so I show them coming out of their mouths. But it's lovely to have that kind of degree of textual authority while you're creating a script. I have Rosa starting to talk about some of the major ideas behind her masterwork, The Accumulation of Capital. So she's chatting to her cat and she goes, "Mimi, I'm as clever as a monkey," she says. I'm going to reclaim that insult. Let me read you a little bit of one of her letters, which I use early on in the book. So there's young Rosa Luxemburg and she's gazing out of the apartment window at home. "I used to sneak across to the window. It was strictly forbidden to get up before father was up. I would open it quietly and peek out at the big courtyard. Everything was still asleep. A pair of sparrows were having a fight with a lot of cheeky chirping. A cat crept by on its soft paws. Antony stood alone by the pump, deep reflection etched on his sleepy, unwashed face. That was the loveliest moment, before the dreary, noisy, pounding and hammering life of the big apartment building woke up. The solemn stillness of the morning hour spread above the triviality of the courtyard's paved surface. The window panes glittered with the early morning gold of the young sun, and way up high swam sweet-smelling clouds with a touch of pink before dissolving into the grey sky over the metropolis. I firmly believed that life, that is, real life, was somewhere far away off beyond the rooftops." She is such a poet. And it's so lovely to have these moments from her letters, which are so much in a place and of a time. It's a very, very human, very personal moment. So to be able to take these moments and thread them together and create a life from it, it's just such a lovely artistic project to be able to do. She has 14 months of sustained stalking by Leo Jorgisches. Rosa Luxemburg's romantic encounters are really interesting, and I set this up in the book. It's like boy meets girl. Boy and girl fall wonderfully in love. They've met each other's soulmate. And then you watch the relationship go sour. You watch the ways in which that they're emotionally incompatible with each other. And then he gets sent to prison for 8 years, to Siberia. He escapes. He keeps escaping from Siberia. Amazing guy, Leo Jorgisches. But in the meantime, she's started a relationship with her best friend's son, Kostya Zetkin, and he's 14 years younger than her, which I think is quite remarkable at the time.
You didn't have what Clara Zetkin thought of that.
I don't think Clara Zetkin had a problem with it, because Clara Zetkin had a much younger husband herself and had faced down social opprobrium for having a much younger lover and had shaken that off. So I don't think she was about to give Rosa Luxemburg a hard time for it. But then, like, if you're going to get into the gossip of German socialists, so we've got Karl Kautsky, yeah? He's a prominent theorist, and he's the editor of Die Neuzeit, the Marxist theoretical national periodical, yeah? So he's a big cheese, and most biographies, I'm sure, would just concentrate on him. The interesting person is Louise Kautsky. Rosa Luxemburg's friends with both of them. Apparently, Louise Kautsky was really in love with Karl Kautsky's brother. So Rosa Luxemburg encourages Louise and Karl Kautsky, she's got children with Karl Kautsky, yeah, to live in this apartment block where the brother's on one floor and Karl's on the other floor with different apartments, and so she can live with both of them. I mean, they really practiced their freedoms.
And Karl Kautsky went along with that?
Yeah, I think it was all about freedom in all kinds of ways. I mean, we think everyone was doing it in the 1960s. They were doing it in the 1905s as well, the noughties.
I always thought his first name was Renegade because Lenin always called him that renegade Kautsky. For years we thought that was his first name.
He's not that much of a renegade. I think he's one of those theoreticians who can tie themselves in knots justifying anything. I mean, at the point when the First World War
Right,
breaks
that was the
out,
big break in the International and the German Party.
He turns around, okay, so the whole principle of international socialism is that working class people make connections with each other and that they work on their common cause and they overthrow the oppressions that they all have together. And the First World War is where that completely falls apart because you have the working people of one country running into the machine guns of the working people of another country. It's an absolute travesty of the whole principles of socialism. Karl Kautsky turns round and says, the International is not an effective weapon in wartime. It is essentially an instrument of peace. And Rosa Luxemburg is extremely scathing about that. She's like, instead of the Communist Manifesto saying, proletarians of all countries unite, she says, Kautsky would rewrite it. Proletarians of all countries unite in peacetime, but slit one another's throats in war. I mean, the idea that Kautsky could turn around and go, oh, yeah, no, socialism was really important. But now we're at war, it's not so important. Luxemburg had the purity of vision to oppose the First World War as part of capitalism and part of imperialism from the outset.
No, the only one in the German Reichstag, or the parliament, who stood up against World War I and Germany's participation in it was Karl Liebknecht. There were no women in the parliament then in the Reichstag.
Luxemburg couldn't vote. She couldn't be elected to parliament. In a way that actually gives her the freedom to oppose what's going on more straightforwardly, because she had nothing to gain by trying to become popular because nobody's going to vote for her because they couldn't. So she was sort of able to keep this purity going. But yeah, Karl Liebknecht is the guy who is the only man in the Reichstag to oppose the First World War. He doesn't do it the first time, incidentally. When they first vote for war credits, it's unanimously in support. But he turns around in December the 2nd, 1914. He's the only guy who stands up in opposition to the votes for war credits.
And he was rewarded by the German government, the so-called socialist government that existed then, being murdered along with Rosa Luxemburg.
Both of them are murdered. I mean, their story is known together. I don't tell Karl Liebknecht's story in particular because I'm just focusing on Rosa Luxemburg. They drop him at the hospital saying, oh, he was shot when he was trying to escape. This is Rosa Luxemburg on the First World War. This is 100 years ago, Rosa Luxemburg's writing this, and I'm reading it for Remembrance Sunday to talk exactly about what the First World War was. So it's 1915. The war's been going for a year, as it would have done now 100 years ago. Mass murder has become a monotonous task, and yet the final solution is not one step nearer. Capitalist rule is caught in its own trap and cannot ban the spirit it has invoked. Gone is the first mad delirium. Gone are the patriotic street demonstrations, the singing throngs, the violent mobs. The show is over. The curtain has fallen on trains filled with reservists as they pull out amid the joyous cries of enthusiastic maidens. We no longer see their laughing faces, smiling cheerily from the train windows upon a war-mad population. Quietly they trot through the streets with their sacks upon their shoulders, and the public, with a fretful face, goes about its daily task. Into the disillusioned atmosphere of pale daylight there rings a different chorus. the hoarse croaks of the hawks and the hyenas of the battlefield. 10,000 tents guaranteed according to specifications, 100,000 kilos of bacon, cocoa powder, coffee substitute, cash on immediate delivery, shrapnel, drills, ammunition bags, marriage bureaus for war widows, leather belts, only serious propositions considered. And the cannon fodder that was loaded onto the trains in August and September is rotting on the battlefields of Belgium and the Vosges, while profits are springing like weeds from the field of the dead. Business is flourishing upon the ruins. Cities are turned into shambles, whole countries into deserts, villages into cemeteries, nations into beggars, churches into stables, popular rights, treaties, alliances, the holiest words and the highest authorities have been torn into scraps. Hunger revolts in Venetia, in Lisbon, in Moscow, in Singapore, pestilence in Russia, misery and desperation is everywhere. Shamed, dishonoured, wading in blood and dripping with filth, thus capitalist society stands, not as we usually see it, playing the roles of righteousness, of order, of ethics, but as a roaring beast, as an orgy of anarchy, as a pestilential breath, devastating culture and humanity. So it appears, in all its hideous nakedness. The Unionist Pamphlet, Rosa Luxemburg, 1915.
We're recording this on Armistice Day here in New York, celebrating the end of World War I. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
This is Comrade Karl Marx, and when I'm visiting the 21st century, I listen to Arts Express with host Prairie Miller. You have nothing to lose but your chains. You have a world to win. Listeners of the world, unite.
That's Arts Express with host Prairie Miller, where art meets politics. And if you're down with the status quo, take the local.
And now on Arts Express.
This is Broke on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass. And today's episode is about sports and sports reporting, and it's titled Depleting the Dallas Mavericks, a tale of greed, gambling, and avarice. On February 2nd of this year, in the dead of night or under cover of darkness, perhaps the strangest, or as the sports commentators put it, most puzzling trade in the history of the National Basketball Association occurred. Luka Doncic, one of the 2 or 3 best players in the league who had led the franchise to the NBA Finals last season, was traded to their rival in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Lakers, essentially for Anthony Davis, who is perhaps the 10th best player in the league. Doncic at the time is 25, Davis 31. Guys, Doncic has at least 6 more productive years at his peak than Davis, who is probably starting a slow decline. In addition, Davis is known around the league as Mr. Glass because he is so fragile and can so easily be broken. Indeed, in his first game for the Mavericks, he sustained an injury which has taken him off the court for a month. The Mavericks are tanking, thanks also to the loss of their now best player, Kyrie Irving, the only player in the NBA this season to be sporting the NBA shooting crown of 50, 40, 90, 50% from the field, 40% on coveted point shots, and 90% from the free throw line. It said that part of the reason for Kyrie's season-ending injury is his being overworked after the trade. Doncic, meanwhile, who has been injured for part of the season, has returned over the last few games and is averaging 31 points and keeping the Lakers, without for the moment their star LeBron James, afloat. The trade is being blamed on general manager Nico Harrison, but that makes little sense. Harrison, who reached out to the Lakers and initiated the trade, is a savvy general manager whose 2 acquisitions last season at the trade deadline helped propel the Mavericks to the finals. Yes, they needed more defense to win the championship. Davis is one of the best defensive players in the league, Doncic one of the worst. But that could have been accomplished with Harrison making the kind of moves he made last year and without trading away the franchise player and without receiving comparable worth. The team, upon hearing about the trade, is, in the words of Kyrie Irving, grieving. and the fans have been staging protests outside and inside the arena. The national sports reporters have thrown up their hands and claimed to not be able to understand the trade, with ESPN Sports Network Dean Stephen A. Smith, who beyond the bombast is actually quite perceptive, claiming that the real beneficiaries of the trade were the reporters, who can now have as much fun kicking around another Dallas franchise as they have mocking the football Dallas Cowboys. The problem here lies not with the general manager Nico Harrison, but with the ownership. And that is a place network sports reporting, except to make fun of bumbling hires, dare and does not go. As Dave Zirin put it in The Nation, the trade felt like it came out of spite. So why was it made, and who engineered this trade? A team was bought in late 2023 by Miriam Adelson, whose son-in-law Patrick Dumont oversees the Mavericks and refers to himself as the governor of the franchise. Adelson, whose fortune along with that of her now-deceased husband is anchored in gambling halls in Vegas and now expanding overseas as well, had in 2024 an estimated net worth of $32 billion, making her the richest Israeli and 8th richest woman in the world. She is an avowed Zionist and a huge supporter of both Israel and Donald Trump, donating $100 million to his campaign and his inauguration, where she sat in the front row ahead of the legislators and with a trio of like-minded oligarchs, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, and Tesla's Elon Musk. Trump awarded her the Congressional Medal of Freedom in 2018. Makes you think of Congressional Medal of Honor winner John Kennedy, with Adelson's request and admonition being, ask not what your country can do for you, but what your country can do for Israel. When irate fans appeared at the Dallas arena with T-shirts with Adelson and a clown nose, or mouthing a criticism when they showed up on the Jumbotron during a kiss cam, they were seized by security guards and ordered out of the building. No protest was allowed, in a way that echoed the current repression on college campuses and the silencing of the left in Israel. 3 possible reasons have been suggested, all of them in my mind plausible. The first, and probably slightest but not insubstantial, is that Doncic is Slovenian and played on the Slovenian national team in the Olympics last summer. Just before the Olympic trials, Slovenia became the 4th European country, along with Norway, Ireland, and Spain, to recognize Palestine as a state, seeing in its struggle for freedom a comparable struggle to Slovenia in its breakaway from Yugoslavia. This couldn't have been anything but irksome for the Maverick Zionist leadership in the moment when Israel was, and still is, carrying out what Amnesty International has called a genocide designed to eliminate any future claims for a Palestinian state or for single-state equality. The second factor involves, of course, money. Had Doncic stayed in Dallas, he was eligible at the end of the season for a Supermax contract where he would be paid $345 million. With the trade to LA, that eligibility is voided. It's very possible the Adelsons wanted to put their money elsewhere. Adelson's stated project in Israel is the illegal annexation of the West Bank, but she is also a builder, and when Trump outlines his plan for building a luxury condo in Gaza, she's a possible natural partner for the construction, especially if the plans include gambling facilities, another Adelson specialty. She and her money have exerted a great influence on Trump's thinking around Israel, and she is so thankful for him that she once claimed there should be a book of the Bible named Trump. Future schoolboys and girls will then be asked to recite the first 6 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Trump. By the way, as builders, the Adelsons are very Trump-like. Their Vegas flagship resort casino, the Venetian, has been involved in lengthy feuds with subcontractors for not paying them, and with the Culinary Workers Union for opening a non-union shop in what is one of the strongest union towns in the U.S. Last year, they finally approved the contract, making them the last resort on the Strip to unionize. They have also been lax on workers' safety, and 3 workers have been killed on their sites, as well as being accused of using their former casino for money laundering. The third reason for the trade, though, is probably the most crucial. Texas has limited gambling in the state, and large-scale gambling resorts are illegal. Adelson has poured millions into the state legislature trying to get these laws rescinded and open up the state so she can make it another Vegas, centered around a massive construction of a new Mavericks arena just outside of Dallas. She contributed $13.7 million to mostly Republican legislators last year to get these restrictions rescinded, but to no effect. The laws still stand. The depleting of the franchise by ridding it of its superstar may have been a warning to the lawmakers that if they do not legalize large-scale gambling in the state, the Adelsons will simply move the franchise that generates $116 million a year for the Texas economy. Depleting the team lowers its value but also turns fans off, thus creating the conditions for either a move out of the state to Vegas or, more probably, threatens the legislators into approving gambling so the franchise remains in the state and can be part of a seamless basketball gambling resort, where the two are utterly intertwined, just as they now are in Adelson's home state of Vegas. The difference here is that Dallas is a much larger market. Where 10 years ago gambling was still on the fringes of professional sports, now it is at the center. Vegas, once anathema to sports franchises who did not want to be tainted with the charge of bettors fixing games, now has a football, hockey, women's basketball, and soccer professional teams, with a baseball team on the way and with college sports events now being held there, including the epitome of those games, the finals of the college basketball tournament, scheduled there for 2028. A study has shown that money for sports gambling, which, since it is online, is now as ubiquitous as pornography, is principally not coming from prior winnings, but rather is coming from day-to-day expenditures and contributing to increased bankruptcies, inability to pay loans, and exorbitant debt collection fees. Gambling is recognized as an addiction in the latest mental health study, DSM-5, and as Dostoevsky vividly illustrates, his gambler, after winning 600 francs in an hour, then started to lose. I couldn't control myself and lost everything. After that, I took my last money and went to play. The Donjit's trade, then, may have been designed to open the Texas gambling floodgates for the working and middle-class Mavericks audiences, ever more devastated by Trump's government cutbacks and coming tax giveaways to billionaires like the Adelsons. Their compensation? Start making every moment count. That's the phrase used by sports betting companies like FanDuel to rope fans in and get them to make the first bet, where the probability is then 50% they will make another one, and that the betting will increase by a factor of 8 over the next 3 years. Welcome to Casino World in Gaza and Dallas. This is Bro on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.